8 billion people evaporated overnight. And the only person left was the guy who didn't finish his homework until 2:30. Looking at the empty classrooms and cafeterias, he thought he remembered the time of the vacation wrong. Just when he was about to go straight home, he found that all the streets were surprisingly quiet. There was no bus that could take him home, so he had no choice but to walk 2 hours to get home. But as soon as he entered the door he was frightened and stunned. Clock on the wall stopped at 2:45, because he clearly remembered that he left the school at about 2:45. Only then did he realize that something was wrong, and he looked at the phone again to make sure. It was still 2:45. How could it be? Has time stood still in the whole world? In the next second, a golden light suddenly appeared by the window. A girl with wings appeared out of nowhere. It turned out to be Rita, the messenger of God. As the man guessed, the whole world's time was frozen. Except him. Turned out the current Earth experience amount was full, and needed to upgrade to the next stage. And during the process of opening magic on Earth, it would make some terrifying monsters appear. So God had put time on hold for everyone's sake, and transferred all humans to another space. Then trained them to start using magic, so that they could adapt to the monsters on Earth. As for why he was left on Earth, it was because his sense of existence was so low, that even God didn't realize he was left behind. The man can't believe that this attribute would accompany him throughout his life. He was forgotten at the station during an elementary school field trip. During middle school's training everyone got on the bus except for him. Even in college he was the last to know that his class was suspended. Now the whole world was gone except him. The weird fate made it hard for him to accept. He cried and begged to leave and learn how to use magic with them. But by the time the channel had long been closed, he could only wait until 10 years later when all humans return. And in order to be able to cope with the monster's invasion, he must constantly work out to be stronger. Day after day training made the man's body have some significant changes. Even the angel was attracted by his buttocks. Although Rita only visited him once a week. But during this period of food was still quite thoughtful. He even thought it tasted better than what his mother made. This also kept the time from being too boring. The foundation of a strong body was there. But to fight monsters it wouldn't work without decent attack moves. Fortunately, although time was frozen, but the data on the network was still there, he could only learn some martial arts moves through videos. To fasten the progress the angel suggested to be his practice partner. But fighting was merciless, so he couldn't accept the offer. The next second he swung his fist against the angel. But the angel directly hit the man into the sky with just one fist. Rita's company made this 10 years pass easier than he thought it would, although the process was still a bit painful. But fortunately, the day finally came. He dressed up and was ready to greet the return of all mankind. The angel also completed her mission and was about to leave. It was not easy, 10 years. The man waited quietly with his eyes closed. But after 20 minutes, he realized something didn't seem quite right. And the angel flying in the sky also noticed something. The angel then returned to his side and showed an innocent expression. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe it was 20 years. He weightlifted 10,000 times a day, just because he was the most invisible person in the world. The Earth bursting with energy was about to face an evolutionary upgrade. Everyone was sent to a different and safe world by God. And he was left behind. His amazing talent of being invisible made it impossible for God to notice. In order for the human beings to face monsters' invasion in 10 years, he practiced every day to be ready for the battle. Despite the boring waiting time he still had Rita the angel beside. But he couldn't do anything to her just once. However, on the last day as promised, he realized the mankind still hadn't come back yet. The timeline was messed up so the final day became forever. 10 years, 20 years, even 50 years had passed. But the world still hadn't changed. The only difference was that he had become strong enough. But the magic of time made the memory of his mother fade. Seeing how lonely he was, the helpless Rita was also very sad. Hitting the ground with a stick in his hand, the man finally expressed his boredom with life. This made Rita's heart tighten. Is it hopeless? Are you going to give up? Although she had no reason to convince him. The task given by God was to make sure he was alive. Do you want to read some books together? Luckily he hadn't entirely given up. Even when facing an unknown future, he was still a positive and enthusiastic man. Since that day he walked into the library, where he had never been before. Both cultural and fiction books had become tools for him to kill the time. During that time he traveled around the world with Rita's company. After a long time, as the last page fell, there was no book for him to read anymore. Rita worried what he could still do after this. But after all this time he finally became more motivated. He even asked Rita what else can be prepared for the upgrade in the future. He had been alone for hundreds of years, but he still firmly believed in the return of the human beings. Even the angel Rita was impressed by his resilience, so she sincerely made a wish to God to hurry up and let humans return before he collapsed. With a vast array of theoretical knowledge as support, practice became more important. The man could drag a huge boar effortlessly, and even carefully prepared various anatomical props for it. Suddenly the man had a bold idea. If all the animals were killed, would the monsters still appear? You can kill as many as you want while hunting, but it would just make the eco-balance went off. As for the monsters, they were. Rita suddenly realized she said something wrong and quickly covered her mouth. And the man who was still concentrating on slaughtering didn't seem to notice Rita's action. He just wanted to practice his anatomical skills. But his inexplicable passion was after he finished something, he could instantly find another thing that interests him. With the last butchery of the blue whale, the man had thoroughly mastered the skills of anatomy. Then he immediately got onto the practice of forging weapons. Even Rita couldn't help complaining. How can man who can only live 100 years do so many things in 300 years of time? But he seemed to have no talent in forging. It took him 5 years to create the first ordinary sword. His hard work was taken away by Rita. She forcibly kept it as a souvenir and cast a spell over it, so that it wouldn't disappear after the upgrade. From blades, to swords, even axes, weapons were also becoming more and more successful. And 100 years later a dazzling spear was born. Even Rita said it was the most powerful weapon she had ever seen. But after the big upgrade, when harder materials came out, these weapons would become useless. Then we could make them again. His optimistic attitude made Rita happy. Today he had no plans for anything, so he was re-practicing the old martial arts moves. And the man's efforts made Rita's heart change. After all these years she learned how to be happy and sad for him. Those complicated emotions finally turned into her love for him. Unconsciously Rita had even thought of the name of the child in the future. Rita's weirdness also caught the man's attention. But of course she acted like nothing happened. The next second the sword she was wearing changed. What was Rita's accessories flew straight to the sky. Rita could only catch up immediately in panic. At the same time a strange thing happened. His clothes suddenly turned into the way it was before time stopped. And after finally catching the sword Rita realized, cracks appeared in the ground under her feet. The Earth Big Upgrade has begun.